Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, we are pleased to present our National Grand Chief, Tarik Bey, as he presents the who, what, where, when, why of money. Let's receive him.
Islam, I would like to open up by making some statements in relationship to fiat and to money, recognizing that most people have limited and very little knowledge of either in actuality. However, there's also a pressing problem in that when most people make reference to money, there's an assumption on their part of having money, when in fact, at large, the people have been disallowed to have money due to the operations of the Spanish Inquisition and the hybrid European colonial operations, particularly initiated in the Western Hemisphere and then expanded into other parts of Africa. And this is with the knowledge that North, Central, and South America are Africa. This includes the renaming of lands, organic lands, the tagging or branding of peoples, Aboriginal peoples, to disconnect them from the land, and the administrative operations in order to maintain such hegemony operations of the Spanish Inquisition, etc. Therefore, in the operations of pilfery and theft and exploitation via hybrid European colonial operations on the planet, it was necessary to distort not only linguistic forms and to hide the original meanings of words and things vital to the people in culture. It was important for the hybrid Europeans to create a platform by which that theft could be maintained and administered with limited repercussions, and thus the subject of what money is, where, why, how, etc. So let's set the record straight on one thing, period, that people need to know, is that trade on the planet, on Midgard Earth, has been at a basis of interchange with humans for millennia. So let's get that out of the way. Fundamental trade and sharing and reciprocal helps has always been the nature of Asiatic African culture, and a recognition that we are people of the moon and sun. And so therefore, the culture of the people is rooted in cosmology, i.e. the heavens and the earth, as the common people would make reference. And so to go straight to the point without burdening you with a lot of details, the alchemical metal of the moon, which is the closest satellite to us, or people would call planet to us, the alchemical metal for the moon is silver. The alchemical metal for the sun is gold. The alchemical metal for Venus is copper. And so you will see in Asiatic African architecture, in their buildings, their major buildings particularly, And in administrative buildings or governmental buildings, you would see the cupolas capped with gold and some with silver filigree and some with copper. That is reflective of Asiatic African culture, always has been, because the culture is based in cosmology, i.e., in the relationship that we have with the heavens and the earth, etc. Now, the details of the culture, of course, many of you know who study Asiatic African culture, is reflected in symbols, in the architecture, in allegorical stories, in anthropomorphic stories presented to children, etc. But let's keep that in mind, the gold, the silver, and the copper. Now, as trade has always been a part of human social interchange, as an example, if I had, say, some vegetable that was needed to my neighbor, and my neighbor had some special juice that she makes, which this is, it's good too. And I want some of this special juice she makes, I would trade my product for her product in fair and agreed exchange. Now, perhaps she may not be into my vegetables. She may not be into my dandelion greens, as an example, because she has some. The trade, in principle, all over the planet would be, well, let's agree to a common trade in harmony with the moral and ethical principles of our forefathers, which is grounded in honor and integrity and key substance for substance. That's key to African culture, to Asiatic African culture, to the principles of trade, substance for substance, and in the principle of contract and treaty, substance for substance. So therefore, if there's a trade and you have no what you would call equitable product that is desired to be traded, we would trade by agreed weights and measures, decimal principles of gold or silver, etc., by weights and measures, etc., in trade as it would be accepted by other humans around the planet. This has always been the rule. Therefore, in harmony with nature, inclusive of the fact that in the construction of the body, there's gold also and silver elements and copper that's also in the construction of the body that's used by women to build these temples that we call a soul of man or Solomon's temple. That's these things here, these vessels. As another example of silver, as an example, actually bacteria cannot live on silver, just in case you didn't know that. This is also why in the ancient world, as an example, if someone was burned by fire by some circumstance, that we would grind silver up and put it in a salve with aloe or other plant herbs and put that on the skin to stop the skin or the body from getting infected, because the silver would not allow bacteria to grow. So the nature of money has multiple purposes in Asiatic African culture. So that must be understood. It's not only its cosmological basis, it is also its health basis. These are things that are not talked about when they're talking about money. Let's go again and go into some of the cosmology of the nature of money and the gold, silver, and copper. And we'll talk about the fact that the moon governs the rhythms of the tides, as an example, the movement of the fish, the different fish species in the waters, the ebbing and flow of the tides, the ebbing and flow of the blood in humans and in life forms, the dew that comes up out of the earth and feeds the plant life as the sun goes down and the moon comes out, the sun by day and the moon by night. These are natural operations of nature in harmony with Asiatic African culture. Now, with the moon or Luna, you will see that with the ecology of the plant life on the planet, etc., it is key to the growth of plants, growth of trees, logically, and trees give off oxygen and they take in carbon monoxide. So we breathe out carbon monoxide and we take in oxygen. The plant life breathes in oxygen, carbon monoxide, and gives us oxygen. There's a balance. And so there's ecological balance as well as the plants feeding us. And so you have economy and ecology related to the moon with the flow of the water and the currents of the seas, the currents of the oceans. And so the operations of the moon in relationship to life on the earth is called moon economy. And from this you get also moon-e or money. Now, when they refer to the ancient goddess Muneta, it is really a cosmological story, anthropomorphic story, actually related to the moon, etc. So keep that in mind, that's the nature. And also keep in mind also that before the Napoleonic Wars, that your popes or Roma was all Asiatic Africans. So you got to recognize that much of the history has been twisted by the hybrid Europeans taking credit for parts of history that doesn't actually belong to them in order to support the operations of the Spanish Inquisition against the Moors, etc. These things I want you to write down, and I want you to do some research and study these things because they're all related. Because people often think when they're thinking of money, they're thinking of the private commercial paper distributed by the Jesuit order through the Circle Church and the Chancery of the board of directors for the Federal Reserve operations of Illuminati, Skull and Bones, etc. operatives. However, that is not money. That is actually a script for bookkeeping purposes only that belong to the members of the Circle Church and the Chancery, which are best known as the British Accredited Registry. And these are crown members that operate specifically from Fleet Street, England, and they control the judicial platforms in what is loosely referred to as all Western countries. And in particular, North America, you would look at, this includes Canaan land, or what you call Canada, Canada, it's us. All of it comes under the Chancery operations of the Queen of England through their Trinity operations of the Inquisition, etc. This is whereas the members of the Roman Curia, i.e. the members of the Bar Association at North America, answer to the Barristers Accredited Registry on Fleet Street, England. They answer to the Queen, and the Queen answers to the Pope of Rome, the Bishopric of Rome. And that's what that Trinity star is, where you see the triple stars that they display in Washington, D.C., and they refer to Washington, D.C. as a seat of 10 square miles set aside for the Roman goddess Columbia. So that's symbolic, but that implies that the Romans have conquered the Moors and have taken over the fundamental principles of the ethical principles laid down via the Constitution for the United States, thus subverting their obligations to all the treaties, etc., which would include the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, Ghent Treaty, the Jay Treaty, etc., the Act of Algiers, etc., all of the principles of the sovereigns which set up the foundation for the hybrid Europeans to operate at Morocco, North America. And this is, again, why fundamental civics is not taught to the people and why the history is twisted. So people look at the operations of the money as the capacity to buy and sell, having not the true knowledge that the private commercial paper that has been issued to the people as money are actually licensed vouchers for entries and bookkeeping into Sister QV trusts that are put together and that are controlled under what is known as the Global World Trust and regulated by the members of the Roman Curia who answer up to the popes of Rome, etc. Has nothing to do with gold, silver, or copper, which is the money. That must be understood. That must be understood. The agreed law of the money is the gold, silver, and copper. For those of you who are studying, keep this in mind because I don't want to get into the details, but I'll give you reference. The Constitution for the United States comes from the Honor-Honesty Confederation. The Honor-Honesty Confederation of Moors is referred to in rewritten and reconstructed history books as Iroquois Indians. I repeat, the Constitution for the United States is not hybrid European origin. It is Muslim origin. It comes from Honor-Honesty Confederation, commonly rewritten in Western history books as Iroquois Indians. That is not hybrid European law. It is Muslim fatwa. That's a fact. And it is a known fact. And it is traced back to Sufi principles, etc. Sufi, which you all know is Sabian. It's all the same thing. This is one of the reasons why, with all the hype going on and some of the problems that they've been having with world trade, and the Pope Francis had made references to his employee, known as Barack H. Obama, who was CEO of the United States Trading Corporation company operating on our land, where he exposed with the motu proprio the operations of their corporate activity. And he also called both religious leaders and political leaders from around the world, and they did what is known as the motu proprio, with a promise that they would cease operations of what is well known as the doctrine of discovery, which again has its origin in the Spanish Inquisition against the Moors, which again has its origin in the fall of Granada, Al-Andalus in North Africa, the northern peninsula of Africa on the east side, now known as Europe, and referenced as Al-Andalusia. And Al-Andalus, it's also Al-Andalus, Al-Andalusia. So when you study Asiatic African culture, remember that the feminine masculine principle is conjoined in the nature of all of the cultural societies. This is where, like, for instance, as an example, when you hear the word Elohim, the people are trained to think that that word means God singular, when actually it's Chaldean, and it actually means mother, father. All right, so it is a duality principle that's also in Asiatic African culture that must be understood to study these things and also to understand the operations of money. Again, the moon governs the womb of woman, keep this in mind, and the womb of woman cycles by the moon. And so the woman cycles 13 cycles a year, and we call the year simply the cycle of the sun, which is 12 cycles to the same cycle of the moon. So the moon has 13 cycles, the sun has 12 cycles within the same cyclical period. This is another reason in relationship to the hybrid Europeans, known as Paleoliths also, in their inquisition operations against the Moors or original peoples, etc., why they, in architecture, will not acknowledge the 13th floor to buildings, to building structures. Because with the inquisition operations and the neutralization, deliberate neutralization, all the operations of the moon, they are countering the culture of the original people. So the moon economy, or the money, etc., must be put in darkness. Whereas we are the people of the moon and sun, they are the people of darkness. We are the people of what you might be called the dominant genetic force. They are the people of the recessive genetic force. And so by nature, on many fronts, they oppose everything that is life. So their political operations will reflect that. As an example, whereas Africans, the culture is built around the moon and the sun, the hybrid Europeans' culture is built around blocking the sun. This is why you'll see in modern era times where once they came into power, they would put chemicals in the air and different metals in the air to create sickness. And it's commonly called in these days chemtrails. So whereas we are people of the light, they are people of the dark. We're still dealing with money now. And so people's concepts of the money is only with the principle of the presentment of trade. I give you this and you give me that, as an example. Let me show you as an example. We will have coinage. Or this is also called Yakimthala. This is where dollar comes from, Yakimthala. This is a gold coin. This particular coin is a $50 gold coin. This is money. This is a silver dollar. This is 999 proof copper. This is Moorish money. To hide the Moorish culture, they will write the Moorish culture as Spanish. And so as they adopted our principles in constitutional principle from the Honor Honesty Confederation, etc., it is commanded in Act 1 or Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution for the United States, in harmony with Moorish law, that no state may coin anything with gold or silver coined for payment in debt. That is the supreme law of the land of them operating by treaty on our land at North America. Of course, that was breached. You can go into the Organic Act of Congress of 1871 and the overthrow of Abraham Lincoln and the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, but you must look beyond that, because it was actually a continuation of the Spanish Inquisition given another name. For their intent was to subvert their obligations to the treaties that set up the operations of the hybrid Europeans doing trade with Morocco, and with all the conventions that superseded their operations here, that brought about the establishment of the original organic trade doing business at Morocco, known as United States Trading Company, etc. And of course, with the overthrow of the Republic government, the intention was to continue the stealing the gold and the silver that was initiated under the Spanish Inquisition. To hide it, they make references to the issues of, as an example, Woodrow Wilson in 1913. Many of you scholars already know the operations of Woodrow Wilson at Jekyll Island off Georgia Republic, whereas with members of the Circle Church and Chancery, known as the Bar Association, members of Skull and Bones, members of the Rothschild dynasty and the Rockefeller dynasty, they continue doing such things that would breach and overthrow the treaties and the Constitution in order for them to continue the Spanish Inquisition operations of the executors, etc., without the masses being aware that this is really what was going on. And so they would change names of acts that they would legislate under a color of law, because keep in mind that all operations, federal, state, and municipal, after February the 2nd of 1871 are de facto. Keep that in mind. You must put things in perspective at all times to comprehend what's actually going on. And then you look at the Coinage Act as an example. The Coinage Act of 1792. So let's present this so that you can take this into consideration in your analysis of money, because we're dealing with what, when, where, why, and how. It'll become apparent to you when you do some more research. And so we're dealing with the Coinage Act of 1792. Now, at Philadelphia, keep in mind, which is Phoenician, Philadelphia is Phoenician, therefore, that it was the Capitolium of operations for them doing business with us. This is also why they have that statue of Winona, who they assassinated, at the base of the mound where they have the art building, and they also have Tammany down there at the front of Market Street near the waterway of the Delaware, etc. With Aquila on his shoulder, and then they have him in a statue that gives the appearance of the hybrid Moors, etc., or the Semnites, etc., which is really what you'll call it, to give an image of what they told you that Indians look like here in the movies, etc. However, and that's Winona's husband. And keep in mind, when they murdered Winona up there in what is now called Lincoln Drive, and it's not Lincoln Drive accidentally, because remember they murdered Lincoln, and that's why they named that drive after Abraham Lincoln, because he was the last lawful president under operating the republic. Thereafter, all government operations were and are de facto. Keep that in mind. It's not a defense of Lincoln in any manner. It's just simply the fact. So that must be understood. So 1902, John D. Rockefeller, who was controlling the railroad tracks, etc., here on our land, start taking over our trade routes, etc. John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, and you recognize that name Gates, and the people who are trying to poison you now, don't think that this stuff is not connected, because it absolutely is.
Wow.
Set up the General Education Board with the determined operations coming from the Spanish Inquisition to dumb down the Aboriginal people, take control of them, and mold them in such manner that they would be docile. And that's since 1902, etc. So when you put that together, you can also see why people are not aware of these things.